Welcome to the Sharing Alumni Advice Wednesdays with the Student Alumni Association. Tonight is our information technology event. Thanks to everyone joining us tonight as our incredible alumni tell us about their career path and how they went through all the obstacles and successes they've gone through after their graduation here at UMass. We want this to be a little bit more conversational. So please feel free to turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable and use the raise hand feature if you wanted to ask any questions to our panelists. You can also send chats through the chat box at the bottom, and Ryan, my other co-host, will actually ask those questions live as well. Also, just a quick heads up, this meeting is being recorded. But to begin, we'll start off with introductions. So hello everyone, my name is Hamza Shahzad. I'm a senior computer science major here at UMass. I'm also the Alumni Relations Coordinator for the Student Alumni Association. And now I'll turn it over to my other co-host, Ryan Richards, to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Hamza. My name is Ryan Richards. I am a sophomore political science major here at UMass. In addition, I am the Student Alumni Association Conference and Awards Coordinator. I want to remind everyone that you can send your questions to me in the chat, and I'll prompt the panelists at the next juncture, and either you or myself can ask those questions. Now we'll go and hand it off to the panelists. Panelists, feel free to introduce yourselves, try to include your major at UMass, your current job, and a brief description of what your job entails on a day-to-day basis. Mike, how about we start off with you?
Sure, thanks. Mike Sullivan, 1981. So probably come here tonight with a slightly different perspective. And I'll just say that when I came to UMass in late '77, it was open admissions. I don't think I would have been allowed into the school, you know, if I had to apply today. I have to say that it was a transformative experience for me, and loved the school. Did a lot of things, and the fact that this is being recorded, I won't bring up probably 90% of them, but I will say that I started as pre-med. A good friend of mine who was a couple of years ahead of me, you know, took a look at my schedule and he's just like, no, you're not doing that. You're going to take poli-sci and econ. I'm like, all right, sure. And that led me to 4 years of switching every other semester to one of the other majors. Ended up with an econ degree. But what was interesting is that, unlike what we're doing, you know, I think what we're going to focus on tonight is it was much more, you know, this is before computers. This is before, you know, the iPhone. This was, I mean, I went to business school and I was using, we had, you know, Lotus, you know, on mainframe. So this is an entirely different world. And I look at where we are now and, you know, again, what I do, and I can't even imagine. I feel like I'm so fortunate that I had the opportunity to experience something and have to go to the library, you know, and take out a book, or, you know, use citation cards. I mean, it was a completely different experience. So long story short, I took that degree, and I was grossly unqualified to do pretty much anything, because my major was in developmental economics. I was supposed to go, I was scheduled to go into the Peace Corps and go to Costa Rica, and just happened to meet someone who became my future wife and decided I wasn't going to do that. And so, you know, one thing I can tell you with, you know, I have a few more years of experience than most people, is, you know, these decisions in life bring you down different paths, and that's the beauty of life. And it's all the things you bring with it, and it's all the training and all the things you learn. And I have to say that there isn't a day that I go by that I don't think about a class that I've taken, whether it's in undergrad or graduate school. And I think that's a really important thing to carry forward with you and the people that you work with, or you know, just your friends. But I will say that, so econ, business school, I was grossly unprepared to be in business school because I had to take every single class. There was no class I could waive when I went to business school. I ended up in finance, and pretty much my entire career in finance, whether it was as a portfolio manager on the buy side or the sell side, was dealing with data and technology. So my training was, what am I going to do with all this information? Because I have no clue how to manage a portfolio. So what I ended up doing is deferring to, less classical kind of training in finance or credit, and more relative value trading. And that was all about how much data can I get into a model and start to build a model that could show me where value was. And that just led me to an entirely different path. So when I left Merrill Lynch, I was the head of e-commerce for my division. I built a lot of different products, managed a lot of development teams. We created, both web-based and app-based technology. And then I jumped from that to, starting an investment management company and a family office. And I'm currently now sort of combining all those things where I do, I literally have two roles. I work pretty much more hours today than I've ever worked in my life. I have two startups. One is a investment bank that works with helping finance senior housing and care providers, and then and educational enterprises like charter schools and different types of schools throughout the country. And the other is a technology company that we're going to bring out a sort of a different way for new people entering into investing, how they're going to invest. And so it's, but the funny thing is, at its core, it's all the same thing. And it's all about data. It's all about how you synthesize the data, how you connect with people. And so I'm very excited about tonight because, it's been a long path, but I always tell people, I think we're all trying to solve the same problem. So anyway, I'll just leave it there, and happy to participate tonight.
Thanks, Mike. We'll hand it off to you, Matt.
Sure. So I'm Matt Shimberry. I graduated 2004 with computer science. I'm one of those people who knew I wanted to work in video games since I was a kid. And so I did a lot of like modding and stuff when I was younger, playing games. And so I went to computer science because I loved to program, loved computers, loved games, really focused. This was, the way before like the CICS program at UMass. And so I spent a lot of focus on kind of traditional computer science, and then all the electives I could take. I tried to like find things that were at least what I thought at the time. Thank you, Damien. I like to find things I thought at the time were really relevant to video games as well. Things like art and history and just all sorts of other interesting topics. So tried to stay as well-rounded as I could then. And then ultimately spent my career in video games. I spent about 10 years at Blizzard working on games like StarCraft, Heroes of the Storm, World of Warcraft. You can see all the stuff behind me is what Damien was referring to. And then I was most recently at Epic, where I was there for about 5 years working on first Paragon and then Fortnite, where I worked on all sorts of crazy stuff with Fortnite. And then now I'm the CEO of Lightforge Games. We're a new video game studio. We are all remote. And we're about, I guess a year and a half old now or so, working on a really cool game that I can't really talk much about, but super excited to be here.
Thanks, Matt. Vinayak, if you want to go.
Totally. Hi, everyone. My name is Vinayak Rao. Graduated 2015 in communications with kind of a focus on film and international relations. Right after college, I worked at a small startup in Santa Barbara, California, in advertising, and then joined Facebook about 5 years ago, and now work in the video gaming space as well. Really excited to meet people here. I think a common theme you'll see is just the broad array of paths and options that are available for people, and really just finding what the right path is for you is what I hope we can really share some stories about tonight. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Vinayak. And finally, Lucy.
Hey everyone, excuse excuse me, my name is Lucy Armstrong. I graduated back in 2017, so pretty recently. I was actually a double major in resource economics and English, and that's funny because now I'm actually a software engineer. So had a bit of a career change along the way, but as an undergrad, I was actually part of SAA. So it is really fun to be able to do this, to be able to come back and speak to you all. I think it's really cool. I feel like it was just yesterday that I was in SAA working with Lindsay. So this is really fun. After college, I thought that I had to kind of go into what my major was and, kind of thought that I had to have it all figured out. So I went into finance and I did like it. But I worked there for a couple of years in Boston in financial services and was just kind of ready for the next step. Didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I figured if I went into consulting, the cool thing was that I would get to work with different industries. And that was really exciting to me, getting to switch projects. So I worked in consulting for about 9 months, lived in San Francisco. And while I was there, I just met a lot of people that worked in tech. And I think that was probably one of the things that really inspired me. I had a lot of friends who were software engineers, had a lot of friends in the tech industry. And at the time, I had never written a line of code, but I thought, this is really cool. I want to learn how to do this. So, the pandemic hit and I found myself with a lot of time on my hands, and I actually ended up quitting my job and learning to code full time. I actually went to a coding boot camp. So now I'm a software engineer at a company called Slalom, which is actually so they're a consulting firm, but they have a division that's basically just for software engineering and cloud engineering. So what I do is I work as a software engineer, but with different clients and on different projects, which is really cool. If anyone's interested, feel free to connect with me. But, basically the difference is getting to switch projects as opposed to being at one company, becoming a subject matter expert in maybe one part of the software stack and, kind of just working on that. So super happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for those introduction, guys. We'll start off with 2 questions that we have prepared, and then we'll go into some of the registrants' questions. But in the meantime, feel free to, if you're part of the audience, feel free to raise your hands, ask some questions, put anything in the chat. This is an opportunity for you to learn from our alumni who've had so much experience in their field. And there's just so much wisdom here. So feel free to ask, grab some of that knowledge. But I'll start off first, which is, the first question is, how did your time at UMass prepare you for the job you currently hold? Mike, would you mind starting us off there?
Sure. So as I alluded to, being at UMass, so I was at, I lived in Baker Dorm for 2 years and I ended up getting involved in a lot of different things. I ended up, becoming, whether my roommate at Baker was the president of the dorm. I was a social chairman. We ended up just doing a lot of things, and many of those things led to us starting a fraternity. 20 of us from Baker left, and we began a fraternity. And being starting something from scratch and dealing with all the, all of that, what that entails, so it's, you're taking classes and you're doing that. The beauty of the school I found was there was just, if you don't go to school and try to experience everything, you're missing out. And so that led me to things. I'm not even sure that it exists today, but there was a for the student union, and there was there's a bond issue that the school fees, student fees were paying off the bond issue for the student union and the hotel, the campus center hotel, and there was a committee, and I ended up joining that committee, became the vice chairman of that committee. And there was just all these little things that beyond just studies you're able to do. And I think that the culture of UMass prepared me in ways that I didn't understand until later on in life and in my career. And I think I carried a lot of that forward, where I just build things. I'm a person that I get bored when I build something and I have to manage it. I like to just go on to my next project, and I think that that's where I learned at UMass what I learned, what drove me, and so I think that you should all try to take advantage of everything that the school has to offer, beyond just your studies. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Matt, how about you? How did your time at UMass prepare you for the role and job you currently hold?
Yeah, I think what Mike said is really good advice, and it wasn't at all what I did. So I think you should follow his advice. But what I did was kind of the opposite. I kind of blasted through school as quickly as I could. I was taking like 18 credits a semester. I had dual enrolled at GCC prior to UMass because I was local. And so I dual enrolled and then blasted through school in 3 years, taking way too many credits, probably burning myself out in the process. But I also didn't live on campus either. So I lived in Northampton, taking the bus back and forth, and worked at the time that I was at UMass. And so I really just attended the classes and did the homework and all that kind of stuff. And I took the time instead to work in my field while I was in school. So I actually worked initially as a web developer and a sysadmin, and then eventually I actually was like making games on the side. And so I was doing a lot of other stuff. So I guess, maybe it's not that different from what Mike was saying, because I was doing other things, just not within the school system. I think in that sense, like, so first off, the classic computer science at UMass is excellent. It's fantastic. And like that, that has absolutely prepared myself. I think that, all those the good fundamentals like data structures and algorithms and all those classes, I think were absolutely critical for everything I learned. And I still, I don't actively program a lot these days, but I'm still teaching, I feel like, the team in many ways, stuff that I had learned at UMass when it came to traditional computer science. And so that is, critically important. But ultimately, it was, I guess, a combination of things like the hard work and great classes and some really good classes. I took an independent study my senior year with Bev Wolf, which I think she's still there, where I was making a game on the side. And that was also super cool. That was my first kind of blast into that. Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore. I'm very sad because I lost that file at one point. But yeah, I guess it was a lot of like side project-y kind of things on top of the traditional computer science where I really got prepared. So by the time I graduated, I got a job in games right away. But I had a resume that was 4 or 5 years old that had projects, that had all sorts of things on that. And, I think that got me a step up in my career, that by the time I was 23, I was a mid-level programmer, I wasn't even a junior anymore. And so that, I think, acceleration certainly helped in my career.
Very cool. Yeah. Vinayak, do you have anything to add about how that's prepared you for your current role?
Yeah, totally. Let me just make a +1 to Mike's original point, because I like what you do outside of the classroom is also so important, right? And case in point, both jobs that I've gotten since I graduated have come from people who I met via extracurricular activities. And that's like a tangible real life example of how much that impacted me, because the other path that I always think about is that if I didn't do those things outside of the classroom, I literally would not be following the current path that I'm on right now. So really, I hope that point drives home what Mike and Matt have just said, because there is a lot of truth to that. It's not just a statement, right? And I think in addition to that is to really like broaden like your circle and horizon. Like, I think one of the things I was so happy about was that UMass like brought people from all over New England, but also like all over the country and also all over the world. It's so easy as a local kid for me from Massachusetts. Like, I had my circle of friends who I immediately gravitated towards my freshman year, but then I realized I was limiting the total number of people I could have met, right? I did everything I could to maintain the close ties with my hometown friends, but also meet people from outside, because I realized I was like, I'm not in high school anymore. I'm not in my local town, and I want to meet people that are outside of that circle. So kind of just adding on to more of what was already said, but definitely meet people that are different from you as much as you can.
Awesome. Yeah. And Lucy, how'd your UMass experience affect you where you are today, basically?
Yeah, so I do absolutely want to plus one what everyone else has said in terms of, what you do outside of the classroom. I think SAA alone put me in a lot of positions where, I was just able to take advantage of opportunities to learn and grow, professionally and just kind of in my community that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was just, going to class and going back to my dorm. Especially, I don't know if they still have the SAA ambassador program, but everyone's nodding their head. Yeah. So I did that. And, that was really cool because it put me around, young professional adults or just adults, I guess, in general. And, I wouldn't have had that exposure otherwise. And so I think, being able to grow your community, but also kind of being able to work on your communication skills is, especially in a professional setting, is super valuable. Everyone told me that at the time and I didn't really believe it. But now that I've been working for 4 years, like, definitely take advantage of those opportunities. And the other thing in terms of like what you do outside of the classroom is try to find yourself in a position where, even if it's just a small leadership position, or if it's not a leadership position, but it's just like leading an initiative. I know SAA commencement ball, for instance, even if it's just having like one small part in something, try to get some practice making decisions, especially when it comes to making decisions that involve people. Because I had some experience with that as an undergrad, and that was like the first time I had really had exposure to that. And, you're all in a situation where the stakes are low. It's okay to try something and see how it goes and learn from it. So that's another thing that I think was really useful, because your academics are also really important, but learning how to make decisions and work with people is also really important. And I know everybody was talking about what to do outside of the classroom, but I actually think that what I learned at UMass in my classes was also really valuable. Even though I wasn't a computer science major, which is what I do now, I learned a lot about, I was still a STEM major, like I did resource economics and then English is my second major, but just learning how to problem solve and how to think through things and how to meet expectations is actually really, really applicable in your day-to-day job. But it goes beyond that. I think another really important thing I learned when I was at UMass was how to ask for help and how to communicate effectively with my professors, especially if there was a misalignment in what I understood about the expectations about an assignment. So that's another thing to really keep in mind. But and the other thing is, it's funny because Mike was talking about how, 20 years ago, everything was so different. And, now here we are, and 20 years from now, who knows, there could be robots walking around our houses or whatever. But I think like the most important thing is it really doesn't matter what you major in, it's your ability to learn. And I think that learnability is the most important skill, especially in tech and especially with how quickly the world changes. So I definitely think UMass prepared me well.
Awesome. Appreciate your answers for that. Another question we have is, what should students know generally about working in the information technology space? If it's all right, Lucy, I'd like to hand it off to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of drawing on what I just mentioned, it's, things change. This isn't meant to like scare anybody, but I think it's kind of exciting. It's like, things change. And so if you're the type of person who enjoys learning, you like kind of keeping up with trends and, you like trying new things, I think it's a great space to be in. It's a really exciting space to be in. And I just think that's probably the most important thing to know about it, is that if you're the type of person that likes to learn, like, I know that sounds very general and broad, but you would do really well in the IT space. I think that another thing is, if you plan on being in the IT space, even if you don't plan on being a software engineer, and there's so many jobs in the IT space. Sorry, let me just turn my phone volume off. There's so many different types of jobs, but if I were you, I would try to take a computer science course, because if you understand the vocabulary and you understand just in general, like, even if it's just a basic overview of how the internet works, your life is going to be so much easier, and you'll also enjoy it a lot more if you know what other people are talking about. So those are kind of the two things that I would say that are important about working in the space.
Cool. Yeah. How about you, Vinayak? What should students know generally about working in information technology?
Yeah, totally. So Lucy, you said it really well, right? That was going to be my first point, that it's like, you don't just have to be a software engineer if you want to work in tech. It's like, I think like there's a common myth behind this that needs to get busted, is because there's so many other job requirements and fields that require people that aren't software engineers, right? And I think like that's the core point that I really want to drive home, is that if you study film, if you study business, if you study nursing and biotech, it doesn't matter. There are jobs for you in this space. And to my second point, right, it's that the technology is kind of, we're at this point where technology is now at the intersection of every single field and every single industry that we're in. And so really find like the fields that are interesting to you and passionate to you, and really find like what the opportunities are, right, for you. Case in point, right, I love video games and I had no clue how to code. I've never made a game. I've never developed a game. Well, I made a very crap game that didn't get published, thankfully, but I had no knowledge of what it was like to work in the gaming space. But really just doubling down on figuring out what it is you want to do, right, and finding what the opportunities are, positioning yourself. And so if I could just summarize, it's to set like a macro level idea that's super simple, like I like video games, and then identify the micro level decisions you have to take to make that come to life.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, Matt, did you hop in as well?
Yeah. So those are all great points. I think for me, a lot of people get into technology fields because they love technology, which makes a lot of sense. I like computers, I like programming, they like that kind of thing. But I think that it can be a trap for people if they don't realize that technology is in service of humans always, and to really think about the humans at all aspects, whether it's the people you're working with or the customers, or the people who are to be programming off the API you made or whatever it is. And so like one of the things that we have as like a core value at Lightforge is this idea of embrace empathy, where like always think about the humans involved, right? Your entire team, and like what's the impact of what you're doing, and how are you communicating with your team? How are you communicating to the world? Why? What are the motivations that people have? But always thinking about the people along the way. There's kind of there can be a bit of a stereotype of like the grumpy programmer in the corner who doesn't want to talk to anyone else, and I think that that's a mistake. I think that anyone who kind of acts that way is not doing the best they possibly can on a team, for their teammates, or I think they're even holding their own career back when that's how they are. I think that ultimately, anything you're doing is going to be on a team with people, and so thinking about the people side of things, and being a good teammate, and helping others, and all that kind of stuff, I think is critically important for a career in this space. I work primarily in UI within the games that I worked on, and I like to joke that within UI we had the hardest problem in games because we had to actually deal with the people, deal with the players themselves, right? Like, oh, you're rendering people, you think your job is hard, but you just put pixels on the screen, that's easy. I got to actually deal with the people, right? And so like always think about people every step of the way.
Awesome, thanks for that. And Mike, yeah, so what's something students should know before working, or about working within the information?
Sure. There are two things. I'm not a technologist. I can program. I mean, I love Python, but I came to all of this because of data. I started, I think, from a different perspective. And Lucy, I think that's what I was trying to allude to earlier, is that I digitize everything, and then I do it in my personal life. Everything I do is digitized. I have no idea why, but I just find everything to be inefficient unless I can process it, analyze it, and look at it. And that led me to, okay, what's the most efficient way to process it? And I was fortunate in seeing over my life how everything has evolved, and I have 3 kids, and 2 of them are computer science engineers, and one's in finance, and the other one's in finance. But I really am very, very cautious about saying that everyone should work in this field or be this. And the beauty, I think one of the things that I always go back to is I love history. I love reading books. I'm tactile, yet I need to analyze everything. So I have this conflict. I'm a Gemini. I balance these two worlds. And I think that, the beauty, I think where we're evolving, what we're evolving into is is a world where I am hopeful that people get to see both sides of where we're going to go. I mean, I've told my kids, I don't think I don't think I had a single career that lasted more than 10 years. I've been able to hire. I've watched technology wipe out entire divisions, and I've helped do that. So evolution, change is going to be part of our world, and it's rapidly increasing. And the best skills you can have is to be a real person. I don't know how to explain, say that, but you have to go back. I think I am where I am and what I've done because it's not about me being someone that loved data. It's because of all the other things I was able to bring to that. And it led to all these different directions and constantly learn. It's the most wonderful thing that you can have in your life is that you're going to constantly be learning. I find it fascinating that, with this whole supply chain thing, and I'll be quiet in a second, that, what's going on with the supply chain. And I mean, there's 1.6 million truck drivers in the country, or at least there were before COVID. There were estimates that 80% of those were going to be automated in the next 5 years. I mean, you look at 1.6 million people. That's a big number. And so the scalability of what we're all involved in is really fascinating. But again, if you bring that down to what what you are and what you want to do, there's so much you can do. And I echo what everyone has said is I was always scared about scalability, but I think scalability is not what we want, that we're going to end up achieving. We're going to be able to take all this knowledge and these tools and these things and really apply it to very, very specific tasks or functions or things you want to do. And it's I think we're all going to be involved in this. I mean, I going forward, this is a reality that we're all we're all working with, which I think is wonderful. But again, still like reading books. Books are really nice. I don't know how else to describe it.
There's actually, I just have one quick story in response to what Mike and Matt said about software or just about tech being all about people. Actually, a few nights ago, I was doing dishes in my kitchen and I had a stack of plates, all the plates that go into my cabinet. And in software engineering, there's this data structure called the stack. Anyone here who's taken an algorithms course has probably learned about it. But the gist of it is, you want your clean plates that you just washed to go on the bottom so that the cleanest plates that are on the top can come off. And, that's a way that you organize things in your everyday life. So any sort of data structure or algorithm in computer science really is just an extension, or it's a pattern that we already see in our everyday lives. And it's important to know that, because anytime you're building a feature as a software engineer, even if you're not a software engineer, even if you're just leading a project to roll out a new technology or anything like that, it's ultimately about what it does for people and does it make their lives easier? Because as Mike was saying, in some cases it might not make people's lives easier. Like, look at the percentage of people who prefer books as opposed to electronic readers, so sometimes there's not a need to innovate. So that's something that's really important to understand is the problem that you're solving with tech actually a problem, and does it actually deliver value in people's lives?
Very cool. Appreciate all your thoughts on that. We do have a question from one of our attendees. Sam, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hey there, everyone. Thanks for letting me take my question. So what I found interesting is all four of you have come from such different career paths, on your way to where you've come from. So one thing I was wondering is, what is kind of the most most significant or the most difficult object that you had to overcome in arriving to the position where you are now?
Yeah, I can start because I have the shortest one. It's just getting a seat at the table. And that comes from networking. And I think that's the key missing aspect that I always see in people is networking sometimes can seem so transactional in today's world. And my biggest advice is when you do network, do not go in with a transactional angle, right? I almost equate it to when you're trying to make a new friend, how often do you ask that new friend for a job in your first meeting with them? Almost never, right? And to whatever extent you feel comfortable, like I would recommend using that mentality, because you should really go into networking with the angle of building a relationship first. And that will hopefully get you a seat at the table, especially if you don't have, a very, very fitting major or background.
Oh, yeah. Matt, did you want to also?
Yeah. So without question, the hardest thing I've had to overcome for the position I'm in now, which is quite literally what led me to my current position, is the struggle of work-life balance, crunch, mental health, all that kind of stuff. If any of you follow video game news, the stories of crunch, the stories of all the stuff coming from even a former employer of mine, these are all real things in this industry. And, for me, really going through the journey of some very, very deep crunch, kind of dealing with mental health and all that kind of stuff was very real. And so anyone who is interested in video games, definitely keep that in mind, keep healthy balances, realize that, I don't want to say it's just a job, because it's much more than that. It is a passion. Like, I love video games. It's my entire identity is wrapped up in this, but it can also be, it can take as much as you give it. And so don't let it take too much. And so always keep mental health in mind, exercise and go to therapy, whatever it is, right? Like do that thing, stay healthy, stay mindful, so you don't have to go through like a deep crash, because mine came right on schedule. I always thought like, I love games too much, and I'm strong enough, like I'll get through that kind of right on schedule, mid to late 30s time period of like the crunch hits you and you just crash, right? And it happened later than by the time I realized it was happening, it was already too late, right? And so keeping a close eye on that is something that I would definitely say is a very important thing in career.
Yeah, Mike, did you want to also add on to?
Sure. I can't stress enough how important it is to network. I was just thinking that, since 1985, I've never once applied for a job. Everything that I've ever, every experience I've had is through the people that I've met. And did I have to interview? Sure, but it was always being tapped on the shoulder for something. And so you don't have to be an extrovert. You just have to realize that everyone in your circle, and the extension, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 6 degrees removed, that is going to be more impactful in your life than almost anything. And so don't ever don't lose track of that. Everyone, we come out of school thinking, I'm going to apply to all these positions and this, this and that. It's really leveraging the people that you're going to find all these little gems. And I can't, it's funny, when that was just brought up earlier, I was just, I just thought of that. It's maybe I'm fortunate, I don't know, but I just think that the more people you meet, and the more people you keep in touch with, and it's just a note. It's just, you can't, I'll be quiet. I can go on forever, so I apologize. It's so important. There are little things that you can do. When you are in an interview, if you just send a handwritten note to that person, don't send an email, send a handwritten note. Do little things like that, because that will carry. You may not get the job, but they're going to remember you. Those are the things you carry forward, all those little things, and you build upon that, and that's going to be part of your career, because you're going to have friends. I have so many people that I talk to that we haven't I'll give you one example. When I was at GE, I ran $4.5 billion worth of municipal bonds, blah, 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 big deal. I had many, many people on the street that covered me. And then I decided I was going to go over and work on the sell side at Merrill Lynch. Almost every one of the salespeople that covered me, I was good friends with them. Because I wasn't paying them anymore because we weren't doing trading. Those are some of my closest friends. And then when I went back on the buy side, things happened again. So it's that whole thing. It's a cycle. It's something you have to cultivate, and it's part of your job. And it's so much fun to be with people and meet people and talk to them and learn. And so anyway, I think the biggest thing was learning how to communicate and be just comfortable and talking to people and asking questions, and learning about people. So.
All right. Yeah. Appreciate that, Mike. And Lucy, yeah. So what was one of the hardest obstacles you faced in getting your current role?
Yeah, first of all, I really, really like everything that's been said about networking. That's super important. And you're with the people that you work with are people that you see every day. So I will also say it's really cool if you can find yourself with a community or on a team of people that you really like working with. And that's something that as you're interviewing, you can kind of feel out. But, in terms of what my biggest obstacle was, I would actually say that it was probably myself. So when I was an undergrad, I took a computer science course. I took that Intro to Java course, and I was in it for 2 weeks. I was one of the only girls in the class, and I psyched myself out and said, this isn't for me. The people in the class seem way smarter than I do. And so and that was part of why I didn't major in computer science. So, I think just kind of like one of the big takeaways from that is that, first of all, like if you ever find yourself in that position, don't do what I did. If there's a class that you're in and it interests you and you're scared of failing or whatever, like stay in it. Like if you like it, get something out of it, even if you don't get an A. So, if I could go back to my UMass days, I would totally take more computer science courses. But another thing was, I think in my early 20s, not that I'm 26 now, so I guess I'm still, mid 20s. But, when I first graduated UMass, I put a lot of pressure on myself to try to figure out what I was going to do for a career for the rest of my life. And I think that especially, young people like yourselves, you feel like there's a lot of pressure, whether it's from social media, just like talking to other people who are looking for jobs. It's like, wow, everybody else seems like they have this figured out. And it was interesting because during the pandemic, after I quit my job, I was kind of spinning in circles. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Do I want to go back to school? I'll be honest with you. I thought about dental school. I would like something totally different. I was like, I'm going to do that. Like, so if you're in that position, like give yourself a break and know that like so many other people your age are in the same position, trying to figure out what they want to do. And again, you can learn anything you want. If you have an interest in it, like take it up, take some free courses online. There's so many resources. And if it's something that you really want to commit to, enroll in a course or, try to find a job in that space. But definitely obviously in that case, building the skills helps. But again, like 5 years ago, I never thought I would have been a software engineer. I didn't even know that was a possibility for me. But I think just like believing in yourself and your ability to learn and also, know that you might switch careers and that's totally fine. So.
Great. Yeah, appreciate all your answers to that question. That was incredible. Attendees, I do want to mention that, again, feel free to raise your hand if you wanted to ask a question or type it in chat. If you wanted you could also type it privately to Ryan or I, and we'll ask the question out loud if you didn't want to put it in out there out loud, but feel free to put in there. But I see we have another raised hand. Kush, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yep, sure. So I just wanted to ask, and this is something that I've personally been dealing with a lot lately, but how did you deal with like burnout when you were at UMass and also the anxiety that when you're trying to like do new things or like talk to new people or get in a new situation, just networking in general, how do you deal with the anxiety and the burnout that it brings?
Go ahead.
Okay. Matt, why don't you start?
Sure. So I haven't dealt well with it always. So I'll start with that, right? I actually, I've had 2 serious burnout cases that were like, got to the point of being a medical issue. But when I am doing it well, I mean, exercise is really important. Getting good night's sleep, really important. Like all the normal wellness things, right? I personally love making time for walks in the morning in particular. It's a good time to like allow my head to clear. I can think about whatever's on my mind. I'm getting some exercise, I'm getting some fresh air. I think that really helps. Getting off of the computer as much as I can definitely helps. Staying off my phone. The phone is really the killer, to be perfectly honest. Recently, I was starting to kind of fall back into like anxiety and burnout again recently. And so I finally decided, okay, no phone in bed at all. If I need to work, stay in the living room, do some work on my phone, whatever it is, and then, put it down and go to sleep when it's time to go to sleep. And so really, I have to be really strict with my boundaries. I'm not good at it, to be perfectly honest. Like, I love my work and I let it consume me because I love it so much. But finding those boundaries and really pushing hard. And I'll also say too, I mentioned this before, like honestly, and I think it's important for us all to normalize this, but like therapy, I love therapy. It's great, right? Like it really helps. It's great to talk to people. I actually have 2 different people, like a proper like normal therapist, and I have like an executive coach that I call him my CEO therapist. And so like those I think are really important too, to just have someone that you can talk to, that you don't have to worry about like if you're, I don't know, being rude or whatever, you could just say whatever it is you need to say. And so I think that helps a ton too.
Yeah, just really question and hope you're hanging in there and for the rest of everyone, right? But I think like the 3 things I want to mention are just so fundamental and foundational, but then again, you can't build a house without a foundation, right? And so I think number 1 is prioritizing sleep and sleep hygiene, because your brain actually regulates all anxiety, depression, and everything during your sleep. So focusing on that is number 1. Number 2 is physical health. Something that I do is whenever I am getting close to like an anxious burnout is when I go for a run or go for a workout, I literally think about everything that's happening while I'm exerting myself. And for me, I found that actually really helps a lot and has helped bring me out of some of those zones. And lastly, it's talking to people, whether they're your friends, therapists, or family. I really like, you find a circle of people who you want to talk to and really just open up, right? There's no secrets. There's no like magic wand that can make anxiety or burnout go away. But every time I've come close to that, those 3 foundational things have really helped me, and hope it helps other people here.
I'll add on to that. If any of the anxiety or burnout is stemmed from things like imposter syndrome at all, like that's real and everyone feels it and it's totally okay and it's fine, right? Like it's funny because when I was a student, I had imposter syndrome. I'm like, oh, but could I really be a real programmer at a game company? And then I was a real programmer at a game company. Oh, but could I really be a senior or a lead? And then I was a lead. I was like, oh, but could I really be an exec? And I'm a CEO at a video game company, and I still am like, oh, but am I really a CEO? Or am I just like cosplaying a CEO, right? And so like, it's real, it happens. Like it's just, I think it's normal for me, and I use it now for drive more than anything else. I think I finally learned that particular flavor of anxiety is normal and fine, and it's okay to kind of utilize it for some drive, and it's not like some kind of, I don't know, deep flaw or anything that I have that is holding me back.
Yeah, Mike, did you want to also add on to the
yes, I would, a couple of things. I would echo, if you ever need therapy, there's no reason not to seek it. I mean, personally, I think it's one of the, it's a wonderful thing. So that's number 1. Number 2, I remember in business school, I was taking a operations research class, and probably the only thing I took away from that class, because the class just stunk, was at least for me, was professor one day said, the only thing that you're going to go through life, and there's going to be a lot of disappointment. There's going to be a lot of trials, tribulations, blah blah blah. So the most important thing is for you to feel good about you, and also for you to take care of yourself. And that means working out, running, doing something physical. And when I thought about that at the time, I was like, oh, this is all BS. But it's something I carried forward in my life, is that, I mean, I hope everyone has stressful work. I mean, because that means you're doing something, you're producing, you're creating, you're doing something, I mean, that's, and I'm not mitigating or disparaging anyone that's not doing that, but you need an outlet. And a couple of the outlets I have is, physical activity, early morning. The first thing I do when I wake up is I take my dog for a mile walk. First, before dinner, we go for another mile walk. Those mile walks are things that I just clear my head and think about all the stuff that, whether I'm, all sorts of things, working out and just getting a sweat, or, and I'm going to get to something you said about anxiety, about talking to people or meeting people. The other thing is, do something completely different. I like reading novels. I can't go to sleep reading a textbook. I got to read something that's a total escape. So do things that are just out of, they're going to take you out of your comfort zone, because it's going to be creative. The other thing about meeting people or talking to people, we're all introverts. We when someone comes up to us that we don't know and they say, hi, how are you? Can I join the conversation? That is like such a wonderful experience for everyone, for you and for everyone else in that circle that you just entered into. If you can, you bring yourself to do that, because I tell you, man, again, going back to networking, those are those experiences, those are the times when you're going to meet someone and you're going to carry that forward for the rest of your life. It may not be every time, but there are going to be experiences like that. And that's the beauty of life. I mean, all we're talking about is just being human and how we experience life. And that's career, interests, all these things. You got to just combine them all, because that's how that's your day. That should, I firmly believe that should be your day, and every day that you go forward from here out.
Awesome. And Lucy, did you want to add on to Coach's original question?
Yeah, I just want to say that I love everything that's been said, especially about going for walks and just getting outside, because, there have been there's so much stuff on the news right now, and just like, there's a lot of studies that have been done on this, just the effects of the pandemic on our mental health. Chances are all of you have probably spent at least 85% of the past 2 years inside. And, working remotely, which is another thing that's very prominent in the software engineering world, or the tech world right now, I guess any world, a lot of jobs are still remote. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Like, in some ways, when I first found out I was going to be working remotely, I was like, yes, I'm going to save so much money. I don't have to, commute into the city every day. And, I get to wake up, in my bed and then just like hop on over to my desk. And it sounds great in theory, but when you're inside and you're alone all day, even if you're talking to people on Zoom, it's really not the same. And it's very easy to get inside your head. And it's also, there's a lot of really upsetting stuff on the news right now. And I just think that, we're constantly all day long through our digital gadgets that we own, like we're just constantly consuming information. And it really kind of puts us into a state of not paranoia, but it's kind of, there's like an undercurrent in our brains always of like absorbing all this information and trying to process what's happening in the world. And that really puts, I think, more stress on our lives than we give it credit for. So just keep that in mind. I love what was said about limiting phone time. That's another great thing. It's just, if it's not necessary, don't use it. And I also recently started doing morning walks and lunchtime walks, and just noticed a huge difference in my motivation and my ability to focus and all that. So yeah, definitely get outside. I think that's, for me, been like one of the biggest helpful things.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we'll go for our last question. I see Amaya has her hand raised. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Hi. You guys already talked a little bit about this, but for the people who like didn't major in like a computer science major field, how did you transfer into that field? Did you like take a course or do a program online? Like, how'd you do that?
Yeah, so yeah, Amaya, so I studied film, right? And I'm not in film today, but I think like the key thing is really identifying like, okay, like I truly enjoyed what I studied. Like I learned a lot from it, right? But it's the people that I met through my studies and beyond that got me a seat at the table, which was what we talked about earlier, right? And really like go and meet as many people as you can. And I think just there's a key takeaway that I can make from this is it's like, you know, you don't have to be a software engineer to work in tech, and you don't have to be a business major to you know, get into business, right? You can do anything you want with your career and path, so long as you position yourself and know the right people to get you to those stages. And I think you're seeing a very wide array of paths, right? Like it's I think like we see a lot of our friends and common paths with what people go through at UMass, and you know, that it does not have to be your path if you don't want it to.
Awesome. Did anybody else want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, so I think first of all, you know, for people who weren't computer science majors, there's so many different things you can do in tech. So I think just kind of identifying something that aligns with at the current time, like what your interests are. If you're interested in marketing, you know, are you interested in product development? Are you interested in coding and software engineering? There's so many different things you can do, but once you kind of figure out at least what you want to start out in, so what I did was I actually started by taking free online courses. There's this, has anybody ever heard of edX? It's MIT's open forum. Maybe UMass has something similar. I'm actually not sure. But whether or not you're taking a course at UMass or you're just taking something for free online, it's a good way to get your feet wet, and the risks and the stakes are really low in that type of situation. So you can just see if you like it. I know some people who took a coding course and said they hated it and never wanted to do it again. That's fine. That's good information to know, because if you become a software engineer, you're going to be doing that every day. You know, whereas other people, you know, say you go into marketing, they really don't like running marketing campaigns and that type of thing. So I would say start by finding something that's free, or take a class at UMass, pass, fail, or just take a class, go for it. Who cares if you don't get an A? I would start with that. And then I actually did do a coding boot camp. So that was not free, but before I went into that, I had done a lot of like self-teaching / using online tools like Udemy, edX to at least learn like the fundamentals. But yeah, it's really just like, it really doesn't matter what you major in. Going back to what I said earlier, it's about what interests you, and it's about how you position yourself, which has already been said. So
just to share some data real fast, we've got 5 programmers at Lightforge. 2 had computer science majors. 1 was literature, 1 was classics, and 1 was biology. So that's, you know, these are programmers staring at C++ all day. Like this is, you know, yeah, minority have computer science in our company.
Yeah, I'll say that most of the people that I've worked with, so at Merrill, we developed some very large scalable tech businesses. Majority of the people were not technologists. I've worked in HFT. I'm not a programmer. Am I a mathematician? Probably more of a mathematician. But I will say this: I've sat in bathroom stalls cracking a textbook to read things. I mean, learning is. I mean, I can't stress this enough. If you have the drive, and the drive doesn't mean you want this. The drive means I'm going to do what it takes to achieve what I want. And again, being someone that has hired a lot of people, fired a lot of people, worked with people, the only people that I've ever wanted to work with, I don't care what their qualifications are. Do they have the drive? And do they have the desire? And so I prefer people that come from, whether it's, you know, the humanities, that are going into, you know, data science, working in business, working in finance, because they bring a completely different perspective than most of the people you meet. I mean, in these large institutions that have become very formulaic and who they hire and from where they hire. I'll give you one. I'll be quiet in a second. I never bought anything that was originated from Detroit, because I never did. I thought Detroit was a really problematic city, and but I went to an event about Detroit, and I met Steve Case. We had dinner together, and I'm like, what the heck are you doing here? And he's like, well, this is where you find value. This is where things get created. And up until that point, I always thought about scalability being something that's going to just subsume everything. And I realized that most venture capital, most things that are created in 3 centers: New York, San Francisco, and Boston. And 75% of the capital that flows into that goes to about 80% of the companies that are created. They don't go, 5% goes to minority CEOs, and about 5% of the capital goes to women founders. And you look at that, and then you look at the amount of capital that goes to the rest of the country beyond those centers of distribution of capital, and you realize, damn, Steve Case is a smart guy, because he's investing in Detroit. And you look at these businesses and you look at these people, and there's so much out there. I can't stress how much opportunity there is to create. And it's just about working really hard. And it's so simple. It's such a simple thing. And anxiety aside and all those things, I've never walked into a circle of people and said, hey, do you mind if I join? My name's Mike Sullivan. That someone said no. That's the beauty of life. People want to, it's about connectivity. It's human connectivity, and what we're talking about now. So enough. I'll be quiet.
Thank you all for those.
Thank you.
That was incredible. Sorry, was somebody else going to add on? No? Okay. Yeah, I think that's all for tonight. We are at 8:05. If we wanted Kate to put the final slide up. Again, thank you all for joining us. This concludes our Sharing Alumni Advice Wednesday. Please be sure to follow us on all social media platforms, or UMass SAA on things like Instagram, Facebook, all over the place. And if you're interested in more events like this one, we'll definitely be hosting them next semester as well. Before we leave, we would like to mention one of our biggest resources we have here. Ryan mentioned it earlier. We just Connect UMass. It's that top link right there. Basically, it's a UMass specific LinkedIn website. Basically, it has a database of UMass alumni that are ready to talk to you, network with you, and share their experiences. So students definitely feel free to sign on and chat with some of the alumni we have on there. There's a link in the chat as well. But that concludes our Sharing Alumni Advice Wednesdays. Thank you so much for joining us. Panelists and attendees, hope you all have a great night. Thank you.
Good night.